Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Mind interview series, where we work to learn more about people just like you who are doing their best to be their best and practice mental fitness every day. Today, I've got my father here, Dave Alden, who is one of the smartest, most special people I ever met in my whole life, not only because I quote him every day and he's my dad, but because he's actually a leader and coach to a whole lot of business leaders out there as well. So I wanted to make sure we could bring him here and make sure he could share a bit more of his story and wisdom with all of you because he shares it with me every day. So with that, welcome, Dad.
Thanks, Liz. I'm flattered. What else can I really say?
Well, my dad has a pretty cool background. He started at Ford Motor Company and was there for about 32 years, worked his way up the corporate ladder, and then ended up in the logistics industry before finding himself in the seat of a leadership coach and also business meeting facilitator. And so with that, Dad, it would be amazing if you could share a bit more of your story with everybody today.
Wow. So you've been around as long as I have. You got a long time for stories. So I'll edit this down just a little bit. Let me tell everybody how I got to Ford Motor Company because it's kind of an interesting story. You wouldn't do it this way these days. So I was in undergraduate school, and believe it or not, I interviewed for a job with a company, and I had the wrong name of the company. So I was banned from interviewing on campus anymore. So now I had to figure out for myself what I want to do with my life. So this is the lack of coaching that I got as a child. I said, well, what do I want to do? Well, I don't know. I like cars. So why don't I go in the car business? Well, since nobody in my family ever had any corporate experience whatsoever, I always thought of being a car dealer, but knew I had no money whatsoever because our family just didn't have that kind of wherewithal. So I said, well, who knows where all the dealerships are? Well, why don't I go work for the factory? So I spent my own money and went out and interviewed with Ford and GM. And they said, kid, you don't really know much. If you had an MBA or something, we might be interested in you. So I went back and I got an MBA. And I went back and I interviewed with GM and Ford. And luckily, Ford said, we got a job for you. And so that's the whole way I got into the car business, is just because I was a car nut. And so it's actually served me well.
Wow, that's amazing. And I want to actually dial in on this particular moment of going to interview, getting the name of the company wrong, being banned from interviewing. We're a mental fitness company, so we talk a lot about these difficult moments. Do you remember what was going through your head at that time when you were told no more interviews on campus?
Well, I was a little irreverent about things in those days. And so that irreverence led me not to be very serious about this and maybe stayed up to too late the night before. And so I just took it with a grain of salt and said, okay, I guess I got to figure it out.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Okay, so now let's talk about your career at Ford. So 32 years, what did that look like for you?
It was fast paced and varied. I think we moved 11 times in 32 years and had some great opportunities. We lived 10 years living and working in Asia. We went over three different times: Taiwan in the early 90s, Japan in the late 90s, and I wound up my career in Bangkok, Thailand. And so it had two different assignments over there. And so I'd say the first 10 years were a little difficult, very hierarchical, old school organization. And I learned a few things along the way that really helped me. And so I had somebody that once pulled me aside and said, you don't really get it. I said, okay, yeah, probably true. What do you mean? He said, you don't know why the company hired you. I said, okay. He said, you're a pretty smart guy and you know a lot of things. However, the company really hired you and to do what they want you to do. So if it's not illegal, immoral, or unethical, they want you to do it with missionary zeal. And that was a lesson that I took away. It's not my company. And I'm there to execute the company's plans. And not until I got to senior level where my input was welcomed did I ever really stop thinking about that moment. Every time somebody did something or I saw something that didn't make sense to me, I just continued on my way, stay focused on my mission, which is to execute what I've been asked to do.
So that's amazing because I think there's a lot of conversation right now on the internet about what it means to be an entrepreneur and work at a startup. but there's not as much conversation around like what it takes to really like make it within the corporate context. And so I really love that. Would you say that that was like the main thing you came back to, or are there other tools or advice that you'd give somebody who's working in a larger company who, is looking to be there for a long time and rise up in the ranks?
Well, I don't know if anybody wants to be in a large company for a long time. I know you've got three other siblings, and you always call me a dinosaur because 32 years in one company, and you've already changed jobs multiple times, as has your siblings. However, here's the simple, because I do get that question a lot from mid-market entrepreneurs that are part of my Vistage network. You want to last 32 years, you got to know how to take a punch. That's it, because you're going to have there's just a lot of pushing and shoving that goes on in a corporate environment. Well, by the way, any environment where there's a lot of people, processes, and teams, and if you always want to be right, you're going to really have a problem in a large organization.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about taking a punch in a little bit, but I want to keep cruising here. So you're at Ford for quite a while. When did you retire and why?
The music stopped. It's 2010, and I had finished up an assignment as the president of Southeast Asia. 2010 was the end of a very severe recession, and we were based in Bangkok, Thailand. It was really nothing to come back to. And so that's why I say the music stopped and there was no chairs left to sit in. So it was a perfect time to exit the business, and the company treated me very well, and it was time to go do something else.
Wow. Okay. So what was that time like for you? And then what'd you do next?
Oh, that was after 32 years. I mean, that's truly a breakup, and you hate to admit it, but your identity and a lot of who you are gets really wrapped up in what you do. And so I learned that I am an individual. And so I kind of picked myself up, took a good 6 months in that transition to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. Then I had the opportunity to go into logistics business, which was a startup within an established company that used some of my skills. And so I'm not a logistician. That wasn't my job as part of it. I took some of the things that I really enjoyed doing and was part of led the business development part of that startup. And it's a business that failed several times previously. And I was warned that we might fail again. And we did.
Wow. So what was that like?
Well, after a 32-year career, after 3 years, it wasn't quite as heartbreaking as I would say the first breakup. But, you don't like to lose. You always like to win. You think you could figure things out. And just things didn't work out that well.
And how did you manage that mentally?
Slowly, you like to always think you can just pick yourself back up and you can just get on your way. But hey, the reality is there's some scars. Take some thought and reflection, and there's always something else to be done.
Which brings us to your current role. So tell us about what you're doing now.
So I'm a Vistage Chair. So this is mid-market business owners that get together to help each other with their business. So I facilitate the group, coach the members, and this is a real opportunity to give back from a lot of the experiences that I've had. But the more important thing, it's an opportunity to continue to learn. So yeah, I contribute some, but I'm also in a position to constantly learn. So we bring speaker workshops into our members, and that's when I really am able to add to my leadership narrative. And I really enjoy doing that. And keeping up on business is a bit of a hobby of mine. And so I get a chance to do that. But if there was one thing you were going to ask me about why I do or what I've got out of being a Vistage Chair, just makes me a better person. Hopefully you see it. I'm a better dad.
I see all of it. Better dad. You're my best friend. It's so good, Dad. I
Thanks.
have noticed that, which is a cool thing to be able to say about your job.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I have a whole set of rapid fire questions. You ready?
Whoa. Okay.
Okay. The first is, can you talk about a time where you wanted to quit because things were so hard, and what did you learn?
Oh, yeah. I remember this pretty succinctly. Freshman year of college, I had always not been a great student, but I've always done my work in the afternoon or early evening. And so it's now senior year, and it's the last week, not the seniors are leaving, and it's the last week of the semester, the last semester, freshman year. And everybody's having a good time. Everybody's saying goodbye to each other. And there I found myself literally on the last day, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and the school shuts tomorrow. And we matriculated, so we were able to do some of our final exams from our dorm room. And I needed to write a paper on sociology. And there wasn't a soul left in the dorm. I didn't think I was going to actually be able to do it. And I called my mother and told her, I might actually flunk out because I don't think I can actually do this. And somehow she talked me off the ledge. I wrote the paper and I graduated my freshman year. And what did I learn? Wow, never leave anything to the very last minute if it's important. For somebody that never left anything to the last minute, it's a lesson I never, ever, ever forgot.
That's a good one. Okay. What's a moment in your life when everything changed, even if you didn't realize it at the time?
I didn't really realize it, but it's when we decided to take the assignment and move to Taiwan, because that set me on a totally different path from where I started. So where I started was to be a district manager, basically an area that supervised from the factory side, dealership activities in the Ford business. And so this was an opportunity to use my MBA and marketing, but it really set me on a path because we spent 3 years in Taiwan. And so that kind of gave me experience in Asia and differentiated myself from others on their career paths. And luck plays a part in everybody's careers, entrepreneurial or corporate. And the company was really at that time expanding in Asia Pacific. And so they were looking for people. So I got an opportunity to go in the late 90s to use that experience to move to Japan. And so that I didn't realize how significant it was going to be. I said, oh, this would be an interesting assignment. And I thought I would go and come back and that would be it. But no, it's really set us on a career to spend a lot of time in Asia.
Wow. And I guess what would you say to somebody who's like at the beginning or mid-career who is feeling maybe a little lost?
Well, I think you got to figure out what's really important. What do you really want to do? I always wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I always looked at this as it's a little bit of a game, that this is how the game is played. And it's not a game in a negative way, but it's not the way you want to do things. It's the way other people want to do things. You want to be part of a organization. You want to be part of a sports team. You want to be part of a hobby of some kind. You got to do things the way they're written. Like I learned, if it wasn't illegal or moral unethical, I'm going to do it with missionary zeal, but I'm also going to develop my skills. So I always were watching people at the level above. Oh, he's a really good presenter. Wow, there's a lot of polish in what he's got to, or she has to say. Or, oh, that's really was an interesting point that brought into a lot of systemic thinking here. What do I need to do myself to be able to think like that or do that? And so it's always trying to be thinking about doing the job, but how do I get to the next level? What are the skills and behaviors that I need to be able to move out? Now, in those days, it wasn't quite as polished with communicating exactly what I did about skills and behaviors, but that's one of the things that I also enjoy about what I do now, is that it puts a reference and frame around the things that sometimes were intuitive to me and a lot of things that I missed, by the way.
Love it. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice. So this is a real simple one. So you said that sometimes I have sayings that you enjoy to learn from, but my father had even more of them. And so one of the things that he always said was, did you learn anything? And so as somebody that screwed up a lot, I mean a real lot as a kid, and sometimes felt bad about it, that's all he ever said was, did you learn anything? And so it made me not worried about failing or doing things wrong in later life, as long as I learned something. Now, sometimes it didn't feel good, don't get me wrong, but yeah, did I learn anything? And that's a constant theme in my head of always trying to learn and get just a little bit better every time.
That's so good. Especially because I think a lot of people talk about trying to learn how to do that later in life. And sometimes it can feel more difficult. That's really great. Okay, now what's a small moment from your early years that felt ordinary but now seems extraordinary? You've talked a lot about you as a youth.
Oh, here's one. So I took a job. So one of the neighbors was a private investigator. And so in high school, I was a private investigator, and I actually interviewed people that were on disability that the insurance company thought were maybe still working. So I had this long hair and looked like a bit of a dirt ball. And so nobody would suspect me as a detective. And so I'd knock on people's doors and I'd say, hey, my brother-in-law had an accident down the street. And somebody said they saw you down there, or they saw your license plate or something. And so what did I learn about all that? I learned that being a good questioner and a good listener, because I was instructed just ask one or two questions and then shut up. It's amazing what people talk about and what they say. So that, carried me for years. Now, in today's environment, I couldn't possibly imagine being a private, letting one of my kids knock on people's doors. But it taught me a bit about asking questions and listening.
That's very cool. Very cool. And I think there were some other adventures there too, but we'll leave.
For sure. Yeah.
We'll leave that one hanging. Are there any others that you care to share?
That's good enough for right now.
Okay. What's the most rebellious thing you did as a kid, and what did you learn from it?
Well, this wasn't a nice thing, but I remember I was the most rebellious kid because, of course, my whole life was to be really to kind of go along to get along. But one time I remember deciding, for some reason, I don't even remember why, I was going to talk to my mother. She maybe punished me for something. I can't remember. And so decided I was going to give her the radio silence treatment. And oh my God, I broke her heart. And so that was just a sad thing I did. And so it was a lesson learning about other people's feelings. And no matter how you feel about things yourself, you always got to have a bit of empathy and look at it from the other person's side.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay. We talked about a lot of things. And a lot of them I didn't know, which is also really fun for me. So thanks, Dad.
Well, that's why I was trying to give you ones you didn't know.
Yeah, no,
otherwise,
so
what would be the point if there was everything that you knew already?
You're so good. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about messing up, because I think that you're really good at it. And you've talked about this like moment with your dad, and you used to ask, did you learn anything? I think a lot of people think that they are mentally fit when things are going well. But then when things aren't going well, when their life gets overwhelming, when they make a big mistake, when they think they messed up with their kids, that's when they start to spiral. And so I'm curious if you have, besides this almost like mantra that you come back to, like the did you learn anything? Do you have any other tips or ways that you've worked to kind of manage those moments where you're feeling really bad?
When you feel bad because you messed up, and you said, I'm good at that. And yeah, I was good at it. And so maybe because I had so much practice, I mean, you laugh, but it's really true. If you mess up enough times, you got to figure it out. And so maybe that, you got to expect that things are not going to go the way you want all the time. So there's an expectation that things aren't going to be so smooth all the time. And so, I don't know, I just throw that in there as you gotta, because sometimes you feel so bad because there's a difference between what your expectation was and the reality. And so if you really think about changing your expectation, not that you expect to fail, but that our things aren't going to go wrong, maybe that just reduces it just a little.
Okay, that's a good one. And I'm curious, when your mind feels chaotic, what do you do to declutter it?
Write things down. I am a huge organizer and writer. It just happened to have me at the desk. You won't be able to see all the detail. but I've been doing this for 30 or 40 years. So here's all the things I got to do: short term, long term, personal, business. I even got some sayings on the bottom, things I learned, and I keep them there until I remember them. Takes me longer now than it used to. And then as I rewrite this every other week, I used to rewrite this every week. Now I do it every other week. Uh, takes takes the clutter out of the mind and puts it in a place where I can see it all in one place, so I can think clearer.
And I noticed that it's paper, not the computer.
Yeah, the act of writing somehow is more therapeutic. I don't know if there's any true mental science around it. I've heard that there is, but writing things is totally different than typing them. And forget about talking about it. I mean, that's just not anywhere near as good. I mean, I think that may be the essence of what journaling is all about. People journal, and that helps a lot of people.
Yep, it is. And you're right, handwriting, it is a big deal. Um, so I'm curious if you were to create like a little mental health toolbox for people. Like these are the 1 to 3 things that I've done throughout my life right now that really help kind of keep your mindset sharp, feeling more focused, keep your mood up. What would you say those things are?
How about the big three? I'll give you three of them. One is always have a saying, and you remember saying this, especially when I was working in really high pressure situations. You got to be in good physical shape to take the mental beatings. So exercise is truly, it's mandatory. You just need to do it. The second is I found meditation really, really helpful. And I find that meditation gives you a millisecond of pause for whatever input you want to then come out the other side. So sometimes you see something happen and it could be what you think is a very stressful situation. Just a millisecond to say, I shouldn't react. I'm going to do this, whatever. And the third is sleep. Man, the world does not look the same when you get a crappy night's sleep.
Agreed. And I'm curious, just to back up really quickly for meditation, how do you meditate?
I use guided meditation. So I'm at the point now where I've been through so many sessions, I just use at the start and stop. And it just kind of takes you through the routine of the meditation. And I don't do it 7 days a week. I probably do it 3 times a week now, maybe sometimes 4. Depends on when I'm traveling. It's a good thing to do, and I just find it helps ground me and center me and makes me a bit more present. It's not a life-changing thing, but it's just a little increment of help. It also helps with breathing. If I was to have a fourth, it would be breathing. I wish I knew more about breathing when I was in my younger days before presentations, and to be able to just relax just a bit before I had to do something like that.
Do you have any favorite breathing exercises now?
I try different one, the box breathing in 4, 4, and 4, in hold for 4, and then exhale. And but other than that, just taking big deep breaths. You can feel yourself kind of right there. Just kind of unwinds in through the nose, out through the mouth.
Okay. So I'm cheating because I know this story, but we got to talk about it really quickly because I think sometimes talking about sleep can sound a little trite. Like everyone's like, okay, I get it. Sleep's important. But Dad, can you tell the story about sleep when Ben was first born?
Oh, yeah. When your oldest brother was born, first, we lived in a little apartment. And to say we were scared parents would be an understatement. So we had a heart monitor that was literally next to the Ben's body, and you could hear him breathe all night from the next room. Like, how many humans are born every day? Do you have to listen to the baby's breathing? So 6 months go by, and I'm feeling about as bad as humanly possible. And so I go to the doctor and get a physical. So the doctor says, can't find anything wrong with you, to be honest with you. I hate to say this, but you might want to think about seeing a therapist or something. He said, but before you do, what's going on at home? Like, oh, it's a disaster. I haven't slept in 6 months. We got the heart monitor on. Every time the baby rolls over, it cries. I mean, I haven't slept through the night in 6 months. Guy goes, well, tell your wife, I think you're cracking up, and see if you can get her to pull that heart monitor off. And so we did. 2 days later, never felt better.
Amazing. And for the parents out there, is Ben still alive and well?
He is, but I want to tell everybody, when you were born, we actually stuffed wet towels under the doors so we couldn't hear. Forget about a heart monitor.
Okay. So we've got a bunch of new parents, I'm sure, listening to this who are very nervous about their kids' sleep. Some of them believe in sleep training, some of them don't. But what advice would you give them for their own sleep?
Get some sleep. you got There's so many different ways, but you got to be good to yourself once in a while. And people think they can run on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. It's kind of like a badge of honor. Oh, I can work with 5 hours of sleep. I don't think the human condition is set like that. So you may be able to go one night and you'd be a hero, but saying that you can actually work and exist on 4 or 5 hours sleep, I don't think so. I've seen some of those people at 3 in the afternoon on the plane. They're in for the big snooze. I mean, everybody, the body needs rest.
The body does need rest. Okay. Now we've talked about Bubby, my grandma, Selma, a whole bunch. So she's got a really wonderful mindset. She's in her 90s now, painting, doing great. Dad, what would you say you've learned from her and or your father about mental fitness or working on your mind so that it works for you over time?
I really can't tell you that they did anything for mental fitness or physical fitness, but yet they seem to be doing pretty well. But I can tell you there's some characteristics that I would say that one is optimism. I mean, just the most optimistic uh, people you could imagine. Never a bad word about other people, and certainly not a whole lot of worry about what other people should be doing, who's right, who's wrong, whatever the case may be. You can't stop judgment, but what do you do with that judgment? And that's really the important thing. Do we just tuck that away as a private conversation with ourselves, or do we need to make a point about something that doesn't really matter just so that you can be right?
That's a great one. Okay. Now, there may be a lot of people on here listening and thinking, okay, this guy seems like he's got it all together. He's doing the sleep.
Not true. Not true, but okay.
He's doing the sleep. He's doing the fact that you're even meditating, like that's really, really cool. But I want you to picture you like in your early 20s, maybe even college, before you got knocked upside the head a bunch of times, you got in trouble, you got this like unsolicited advice from someone at work, all that. What would you have told that version of yourself to maybe speed things along a little bit, get you a little more interested or excited about these topics?
Maybe be a little more present. I have this other little mantra that we grow too soon old and too late smart. And so I've learned a lot of these things, a lot of it from Vistage, by the way. And it's been a real learning experience about a lot of this stuff. But I think be a little bit more present.
And what does that do for you?
I think sometimes you got to think about the implications of your actions. Don't know that I always did that. And so I just kind of head down, pencil up, which was an old corporate saying. And, but that's what it really meant. But there's some benefits to that, but also being a bit more present and a bit more thoughtful about things.
Love it. Okay. Anything else on the topic of mental fitness that you care to share that we brought up that you're interested in?
Now, it's just a journey and it's a roller coaster. And so you just got to figure out, the roller coaster, you're going to be up on the high and then you're going to go down the hill. You got to get to the bottom. You got to figure out a way to get back up to the top of the roller coaster ride. And so I think that's really I think that's the key. The sun can shine every day, but you got to deal with things. That's just how life works, right?
Awesome.
So,
There's one more thing I realized we didn't touch on that's pretty important. And I feel like we talk a lot about it. I think it's pretty important for this audience because a lot of people are partnered. They've got husbands, wives, they've got folks that they care a lot about in relationships. How do you think about mental fitness in relationships? So you've been married to mom for 42, 43 years now? Happily, I should say. So like what advice would you give to people who are in relationships about how to treat themselves in the context of two people?
You got to meet them where they are. That means you got to be the going in proposition. You're in there for 55 or more percent. And so that's really important. You got to be thinking about that other person. And so don't have to do things the way you want to do them all the time. And you got to be thinking about how do we give more than we get? That's the 55%.
Yeah. And in those moments where you're like arguing over something or something feels unfair, um, or you feel like you need your perspective to be heard, maybe you're not in that giving mindset because you're in a little bit of your fight or flight stress response moment.
Oh, I've had a few of those, believe me, as you well know.
So what do you do to move through or past those moments so that you can move to a place of generosity?
What is really important to the other person? What are their values? And are they being true to their own values? Sometimes you don't have to always agree, but you have to understand and then move on.
Oh man, moving on. That's tough.
Sometimes it is. That means really moving on. That means don't bring it up the next time we have a conversation. Don't add that with the 3 other times I was wrong.
um, Amazing. Well, Dad, this has been so much fun. Thank you for bringing some news stories for me and some oldies but goodies as well. You always make me laugh and always make me think. So I really appreciate it.
You're the best.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this very special episode of our Modern Mind interview series. We hope to see you on the next one.